So, about 18 months, 2 years ago, we started something called the Church Planting Coalition. I say we, that's Together for the Harvest, but the Church Planting Coalition is really bigger than Together for the Harvest. It's not trying to operate within small confines, but let me just give you a quick background to TFH for those of you who may not be familiar. So Together for the Harvest, it's been around about 30 years, probably, and it's always had a very clear mission mandate. It's about reaching every man, woman and child with the gospel. It's about gospel saturation and transformation of towns and cities. It's about wanting to see Jesus come back. Anybody want to see Jesus come back? Yes. That sounds good to me. No more suffering, no more pain, no more pastoral hassles. That sounds good to me. So that's always been our vision. The last few years, 2 or 3 years, we've aligned ourselves with a national organisation called Kairos Connection and brought into their 5 priorities for doing that, reaching a whole town or city. The number 1 is citywide prayer. Number 2 is serving our cities with social action, marketplace and civic engagement. Number 3 is disciple-making strategies, which includes all the evangelistic stuff. Number 4 is church planting, which is what we hear about today. And number 5 is leader health, trying to make sure that leaders stay healthy in it for the long haul. And the Church Planting Coalition's come out of that, and I'm thrilled that Maurice is taking the leadership of that, which is super helpful. And in a moment we're going to have Maurice and Steve, Steve being Maurice, interviewed by Maurice, and I'll explain more about that in a moment. So just a little bit more background. We cover the 6 regions. I say we cover, aspirationally we cover the 6 boroughs. We don't yet have anything happening in Knowsley. Still waiting for God to bring along the right leader to help us work with churches in Knowsley. One of the big things going on at the moment is the 4 Points campaign, which most of you will be familiar with. By the way, there are some tiny little business-sized cards on your table. Please do take one of those. It's got a QR code on it, and if you're not already a member of TFH and you'd like to support the vision of it as an individual or as a church or organisation, love you to sign up there. And you can also, on the front page of the website, which is where it takes you, it'll take you to all the information about the 4 points. So please check that out if you want to. As I say, the Church Planting Coalition came into being around 2 years ago, and gradually figured out what we're about. We're about trying to give prayer support to people who are planting, sharing information and getting prayer going for one another. About practical resourcing, which is trying to how can we identify or create resources to help church planters that will be of use across the board. Partnering and training, which I'll come to in just a moment. And then eventually, we hope that we'll not only be encouraging individuals, individual churches or individual streams and denominations to plant churches, but actually to see whether God might give us the grace to work together across church to plant churches. And all of this is in the hope that we could actually plant more churches by doing it together than we could on our own. Because ultimately we want to see one missional expression of church for every 1,000 people. We currently have about 1 for every 5,000 people at the moment, so that's a big jump there. We figured that if we can get one missional expression of church, and I say that deliberately rather than one church, because that could look like a house church, a micro church, even a missional community, anywhere that plants a group that is geographical or demographically focused, that takes missional responsibility for that neighbourhood or that group of people. That's a missional expression of church. And we've started to map some of those. I won't explain all the mapping, but Harvey has been helping us with that mapping, which is great. And that's the dream, 1 in 1,000, so we're trying to keep track of what is actually happening. A couple of the resources, one that Maurice helped put together called 10 discussions to have with 12 church planters. There are a bunch of those on the table. We give them away free today, so if you haven't got one and would like one, please do grab one. And then some books that Steve made available to us, Faithful Church Planter, also available on the table to help you start if you'd like one. This is the organisation that we are planning to partner with for church planting training. M4 Europe, the website's at the top there if you want to check it out. They've been around for quite a while. They're planting in loads and loads of countries across Europe, and their Their dream is to see one church planted every day in Europe. Sounds amazing, doesn't it? Hello? Yeah. Is there a missional pulse in the room? That sounds amazing to me. They've got a UK base, and we're talking to them about possibly starting towards the end of the year, maybe September time. And it would be like, it's for lay leaders, it's not for professionals, it's for people who have a vision to plant church, and it's for teams. It has to be for people who've got a team together to come on the training as a team. And it's basically every 6 months you come together for an in-person gathering, like 24 hours across a Friday and a Saturday. And then in between times there's coaching for the teams, and there are lots of videos to watch where the training content is actually being delivered in between those gatherings. So you can do that as a church team, as a group, by yourselves. And at the end of 2 years, the aim is to have a thriving plant up and running. And it's for people who are considering planting and have a team, or it's for people who have just planted and want to get more help and support in the planting they're already doing. So we'll be telling you more about that as we get more information and as plans become more concrete. We will be looking for a church to host that in, a host church that can help us. So just be praying for us as we're discerning what God's saying and how to roll that out. And it'll be very generic, the training. It won't be linked to any specific theologies. It'll be mainly about the practicalities and helping people grasp what God's saying to them for their context, rather than trying to present a cookie-cutter model for church planting. That's the M14 process. That's how they describe it, and you can take a look at that at your leisure. So it is my great pleasure to introduce Maurice and Steve. Maurice McCracken and Steve Robinson. These are two experienced church planters, and Maurice is going to be interviewing Steve to give us some insights into the sort of thinking behind church planting, why we might want to engage in that. Some of you are here, I know, because you're already planting, some of you because you are about to plant, some of you because you're interested but not sure yet whether you're going to. But we'd love you to be just part of the conversation. There'll be Q&A afterwards, so save up those questions, and there'll be time to pray together at the end. So, Maurice and Steve, like to come up? Yeah.
Thank you everyone for your time. Just to echo Mick's thanks for giving us this time to talk about this. I'm talking to my good friend Steve. That's because people talk to me about church planting, and I find that sometimes people who lead churches themselves are a little bit suspicious. Is suspicious the right word? Tentative about the idea of planting. For two reasons. So occasionally you meet someone and they say, yes, our church was a church plant, and then you talk through about what they actually mean, and you clock, oh, that was actually a church split. That's why this started. No one decided to plant a church here. It was like someone decided they wanted to leave and take people with them, and that bruises the church. That's happened too. I think the other thing that sometimes can happen is that someone says, we really need to plant a church in this area, and it's right on your doorstep where you're already doing things, and it makes us suspicious about the concept. I'm bought into TFH because the thing that Nick is always pushing us to think about is how are we going to get every man, woman and child in the city region to hear about Jesus? And I basically think planting churches is a way for that to happen. So we need to stop thinking simply about how do individuals hear, but also about how do we connect people to communities that are on mission together. And church planting is part of that. And Steve is the person in my life who is actually, amongst other things, trying to do evangelism that way. So losing basically people from his own church, Cornerstone, which we'll talk about in a minute, in order to have new churches in different places. And so that's what I'm going to talk to you about. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Good. Do you want to tell us first, Steve, a little bit about Cornerstone and South Liverpool, and then what churches are in your collective and how they started?
Yeah, not a problem. Just a little bit of context. I'm married to Sean. I've got 4 children, 2 girls and 2 boys. The girls were amazing. Then the boys came along, and then I realised I wasn't a great dad. And I've been at Cornerstone Church since 2009. Cornerstone was formerly a Brethren assembly called Ramblers Road Chapel, which is just off Penny Lane, Ramblers Road, Penny Lane. I actually grew up at Bridge Chapel. I was here and in the previous building from 2 years of age. So I spent 13 years being part of this church, and then I went and did this revitalisation. By God's grace, to cut a long story short, we worked with the existing team of 15 people. The team of 15 people, and a few people leave straight away, 27 of us. And by God's grace, the way I describe it is that God the Father has given me a front row seat to watch his son build the church. And we grew, we went to a few churches, and then in 2020 we were able to buy the old Dovetail Baptist Church, which is on the road of Penny Lane. We bought the whole church, and it's enormous, for £145,000. Oh, I think that's a cheap. There is no pulse in this room, Nick. There is no pulse in this room. We bought it for £145,000. Then we realised it needed probably about £3 million worth of work doing to it. And they want to insure it for £7 million, so it was a bit mad. So I've been the pastor there for a number of years, and church planting is the heartbeat of who we are. In the context of South Liverpool, it's interesting. I think where Penny Lane sits and where we are around those streets, the way I describe it, it feels a little bit where middle class and working class people sort of meet. So it seems to be that, and that's changed over time. Like I'm born and bred in that community, so I've lived there all my life, pretty much. Moved 2 miles out and came back within a few years. And there is a diversity with people, especially along the lines of class in the context of Liverpool. So middle class, Scouse middle class, working class, Scouse working class, whatever that means. And you just see that sort of coming together. So it feels like a bit of a meeting pot for a little melting pot of the diversity that I think you see in Liverpool. I don't think we're as diverse as other big cities, but definitely in terms of socio-economic understanding of what that looks like in our context, that all seems to happen.
Great. And then tell us about church plants from Cornerstone.
Yeah, so we've been blessed. God's been kind to us. We've been involved in a number of different church plants. We planted a church on the Wirral. We've planted a church in Lark Lane. We've planted a church in Kensington. We've done a church revitalisation in Orrell Park. In Columbia. We're praying about planting a church in Old Swan at this moment in time. We've also worked with 2 or 3 other church revitalisations. We sent a guy and planted a church in Romania. We're helping plant a church in Hesketh Bank. And when I say help, some of those churches have been direct church plants where we've sent people from our churches. But some of the revitalisations have been where we, as a church, have walked with and supported and encouraged and helped churches get to a point of being revitalised, or to help teams develop that. And we've done, as the church, a lot of coaching and mentoring in the context of churches that are outside the Merseyside region, but we want to support. And 5 of those churches, including Cornerstone Church Liverpool, make up what we call the Cornerstone Collective of churches, which is our sort of collective network communion of churches. And the primary reason for that is not to build a network. The primary reason for that is that because the context of Liverpool being the way that it is, in the sense that we're not flush with cash, but we're flush with quality people in the context of our. And when I was involved in revitalising Ramblers Road Chapel, I felt that I was very much on my own, trying to figure it out. Lots of difficulties in terms of that. And I know about you guys, the things that were keeping me up at night weren't the sermon I had to prepare, or even the people that I was visiting. The stuff that was keeping me up at night was all the administration stuff. It was all the operation stuff. It was the health and safety. It was all the child protection stuff, DBS, whatever, CRPs it was back then. All those sorts of things. I don't know what I'm doing with that. I'm figuring it out, you know what I mean? And I felt that we needed some sort of vehicle to help us plant churches, to support operationally, those churches to be autonomous, in terms of their leadership and functioning, but to be interdependent in how we function, training, support, mentoring, coaching. And that's the reason for that. So a number of the churches that we've helped and supported and actually also sent some people to in different parts of the country aren't part of the Cornerstone Collective, because that's not the goal. Cornerstone Collective is a vehicle to help churches be planted from our church and the other churches in the collective.
Great. Thank you. You must, when the Cornerstone Collective gets together, think, wow, if we had all of these people in our church, Cornerstone Church would be amazing. And instead, you've paid the cost and you have those people all in different churches because people have come to know the Lord because there was a church near them instead of not near them. Could you tell us just a few stories maybe of people you've seen come to know the Lord Jesus through churches that you've planted or revitalized?
I would... God, how long have we got?
Yeah.
There's so many.
Not that long.
Not long. There's so many. I think even from the first revitalisation that we did, which was Ramleys Road, just going to Ramleys Road and working with people, older folks that thought that their church was going to close. They genuinely did. They were that desperate, they asked me to go. That's how bad it was. And we went, a small group of people, and I wanted to be faithful was I wanted us to be faithful in the teaching of the Bible, expository Bible teaching. I wanted us to develop leaders and grow leaders, and I wanted us to have a passion for planting churches and to be engaged in the community where we are. What was interesting with Ramleys Road, they had this map, and they were praying for these people all over the world, which is wonderful, and we need to do that, but nobody knew their own neighbours. Nobody knew the community that we were engaging in any context. So in one sense, not that I didn't want us to not keep our heads above the parapet to pray for those who were doing different things. I just wanted the focus to come back in. And as a result of that, by God's grace, I'll be honest, I'm Scouser, born and bred. I wanted to reach Scousers. That was my heart. And God said, your vision's not big enough. And the first guy to get saved in our church was a Romanian guy who lived in the road next to the church. We just put a leaflet through his door. We actually put a Bible through the door. And his story is that he'd already been reading the Bible and effectively had got saved just from reading the Bible. He turns up at Cornerstone Church. He didn't want to go back to Romania. Long story short, Vlad was with us Vlad was with us for a number of years. We were able to train him. We sent him back to Romania, and he's planted a church in Timișoara, Romania, with his wife. So if we hadn't have gone to Ramleys, there wouldn't be that church in Romania. And so God's been kind. One of the churches we planted in Kensington, just as the community moved there, they were starting to knock on doors just to get to know people and just introduce themselves. And they bumped into a guy called Elon. And Elon was from Trinidad. And he was a lonely man. And they ended up befriending the guy, and he'd come along to the small gatherings that they were having in Kenny at the time. And basically it transpired that Elon had got himself into trouble with the police. And the trouble that he got himself in was that he needed some medical care that he could only have in the UK, and he transported some stuff from Trinidad on the promise that somebody in Trinidad would pay for his medical care in the country. He got caught. Nobody knew this at the time. Elon became a Christian. He became a Christian. He then shared this story with the pastor George in that, and he said, "Look, I'm probably going to be going to prison." What was amazing was, if that happened, he ended up going to prison. They actually gave him a little bit of time before he went in to get his affairs in order, and a couple of weeks. So he did that, and the church got him at the front, laid hands on him, and prayed for him as a missionary into prison. And Elon went into prison, was engaging in all the stuff. He was doing Bible studies with guys on the wing. People loved him. He's now back out of prison, serving in the church, doing wonderful things for God. I could tell stories all day long. And a lot of that, all of that, and even in different places, all the churches have seen people come to know Christ. And so, to go back to what you said, looking out, what I get really encouraged by, in one sense, it would be amazing. There are lots and lots of people. What I'm encouraged, I don't know most of them. And most of them are brand new Christians. And that's what church planting is not about moving people around. Church planting is about reaching people who do not know Jesus. And the Church of Jesus Christ being the means by which his glory is displayed to the world. And I think when Paul says in Romans, doesn't he, that, I make it my ambition to preach the gospel where he is neither named nor known. And we could look at that and go, well, we live in the UK, we live in Liverpool. There's a lot of history in terms of gospel witness and gospel proclamation, but the bottom line is we are living in a context, in a culture where so many people, even if you're under the age of 40, I guess now, probably no biblical input on any level whatsoever, even in the church schools, on any whatsoever. We are preaching the gospel to people who that neither have named or known the Lord Jesus Christ. And how do we do that? We do that with people moving in who love the Lord, who are living in a context. We can talk more about that in a minute, I guess. And what does that mean? What does that look like? And people are seeing that, hearing the gospel and getting saved. So what I'm encouraged by is, who are these people? I don't know who they are, but praise the Lord. They're being saved.
Tell us as well, so I think you've always focused on training leaders, and church planting is a really great way for leaders to have to step up, really. Can you give us 1 or 2 examples of people who've done that and how they've grown in ministry and learned to lead? Yeah,
I think Vlad is one. Like that, Vlad would be one in the sense that this guy from a complete communist sort of background, in the sense that he didn't grow up in communist Romania, but he still lived under the cloud of that for many, many years. Complete atheist, and God saved him. And we were able to work with him and train with him. And it was him who said, I need to go back to Romania and tell my people about Jesus. So therefore, it was that desiring heart from him to move that forward. There are many. All the churches that we've planted, they've all the guys have walked through some sort of church planter residency with us. So we're spending time specifically to help them think that through. What does that look like? Create the opportunity for them to not only grow in their understanding of what it looks like to plant a church or revitalize or replant a church, but also to have time to prepare for that well. And when I say prepare for that well, I'm not talking about one particular way of doing it, but actually preparing well to be in the community where they're going to be planted, to engage with the culture that they're looking at, and they're figuring out what is best in light of what our convictions would be biblically, because we have that and we hold to that. But there is that cultural fluidity, I guess, in terms of, well, what does it look like to plant a church in Lark Lane compared to what it looks like to plant a church in Belvale? Because they're different. So therefore, we've got to help people and help guys figure it out. And it's more than just having a pulpit to preach from. It's a people to proclaim to, which is very different. Just a different way to engage in that. So all the guys that we've planted have done that and walked in that. A number of the guys have been quite new Christians and over time. And I think so my conviction is this. I think if we are, as pastors, my conviction is, if we are not investing and engaging in the next generation to see leaders and pastors grown, I actually think we're not doing an element of the job that God has called us to do. And I think I see that, especially in the New Testament. I see that with Paul, with Timothy. In fact, 2 Timothy, it's the first thing that he effectively tells Timothy to do. Take what you've heard from me in the presence of many witnesses and give unto faithful men so they could go and do likewise. And there's a sense that it is part of the vocational ministry of what it is to be a pastor, to train people, to send them. Is a noble thing to desire eldership. It's a noble thing to desire all these things. Developing people to be leaders is part and parcel of what it is to be a pastor and minister in the gospel. So I think it's just always flown out of what we do. Now, what that looks like at different points of people's walk with Jesus is different. Of course it is. So in terms of, and then when we get to the point of actually pouring in and concentrating on people that are going to go and plant churches, it's been something that we've done. So there's loads of stories. Yeah.
The church planting thing basically opened the door for those people to step into leadership.
100%.
Probably in a way they couldn't if they were still under you.
Well, it couldn't. Yeah. There's, hear me when I say this. There's only one sort of pulpit at Cornerstone Church. That doesn't mean that I preach all the time. I don't. But the reality is this: we've got to deploy people to do these things. I'm thinking about the book of Titus. So Paul writes to Titus in Crete, and what he's saying is, look, the culture is completely crooked, and And the way that we're going to get this in order is that I want you to appoint qualified men to be leaders. Now, Crete was the island of 1,000 towns. Is that right? The island of 1,000 towns. So the assumption there, and I don't think it's just an assumption, he's saying appoint elders in every town and city. So the assumption is there is a church in every town and city on Crete. Now, I've been to Crete. It's not very big. So the place is flooded with churches, with people who love Jesus, that are reading the Bible, who are trying to figure out what that looks like. And actually, it's like appoint people to do these things. So the natural flow, I think, of what it is to preach the gospel, to equip people for ministry, to build up gifts, is that people are going to come to a point and in gifts of leadership and influence, that it's only right for us to deploy that. And one way of doing that is sending them to different churches and Bible colleges and then moving on, which is great. But I think the best way, I really do, I would hold to this, the best way is to send them to go and plant churches or being part of teams to plant churches. I'd rather build up than buy in any day. Yeah. And I think that there's a biblical element of doing that.
Yeah, great. Let's talk about cost. So there's a cost to Cornerstone of keeping this on the agenda. Yeah. Of course, there's a monetary cost, that goes without saying, but can you tell us a little bit about the personal challenges of letting people go who you love? And also, are there ways that you felt over time, Cornerstone's been set back a bit because we've done that instead?
Yeah, I think there's always a cost relationally. So you go from Acts 20. Paul's on the beach, I'm assuming. He's there. He's talking to the elders that he's worked with, he's loved, he's spent time with, and they're in bits. Emotionally, they're in bits. They know that Paul needs to move on. Paul knows that he needs to move on. It's right for what he's been called to. They're all in bits. They're crying. There's a real brotherhood there. There's a real relational brotherhood. And I think if you're training people to that level, and to that level of investment, when you're sending them, and you're in the right sense, because I think a lot of things happen because of split. I think it does. I think it can be masqueraded. Whereas if you're sending them with a joy, and this is exciting, it's going to be hard emotionally. Because you're going to go from spending all this time with these people that you love to letting them go. Like my kids aren't old enough to be married, but my girls are getting closer to that age where that could happen at any point. And I want that day to be a day of absolute rejoicing because they're marrying a really, really good guy who loves the Lord. I want that day to be that. But I know it's going to be emotional because I'm letting them go. I'm letting them go. I think there's a cost to that in one sense, but the flip side of the same coin is there's a great joy to that. And I think which then changes in one sense the mindset of sending people and actually seeing the sacrifice of losing gifted people, quality people, committed people, is hard because our natural bent and our natural reflex, I think, is not to trust God, that He will replenish in the right sense for us to continue doing what you're doing. There have been moments where I've been panicked by that a little bit. I'll be honest with you. And as I get older, there's a sense of I'm not going to be here forever. We need to hold on to a few of these people so that they can continue what God is doing here. But I also just think there's a sense of trusting. But there's a great cost. I'll be honest with you, there's probably more of a cost for the church than there is for me. And the reason that is because I still have a lot of contact with, I meet these pastors every week. The Cornerstone Collective, we spend time together. But there's a bigger cost for the church family. And therefore trying to lead and love and keep and see the joy and the evidences of God's grace, and actually to see this is what God has called us to do. And when we walk in step with His will, there is cost, it can be painful, but it's always grace-filled and it's always joyful. It always is. To be in step with the will of God, there is always joy. Of course there is. Of course there is. It can be painful, it can be difficult, it can be all those things, but there's always joy. I'm trying to show that. So I'll give you an example. I remember it wasn't to do with anybody that we sent in terms of the leadership, but I was at my table with my kids a few years ago, and we were sending the church to Kensington to plant, and one of the, Sean, my wife, asked me, who's going as part of the team. So I rattled off a load of names, and I mentioned this one young lady's name that my kids absolutely loved. And they were devastated, like absolutely devastated. And my eldest daughter said, Dad, will you just please stop planting churches? But that was a cost to them. It was a cost to them. And it was a cost to my kids personally have seen many people come and many people go who have been sent out. And it's a cost to them. But I've got to walk with my kids to say that cost is far greater than keeping. That cost and that sacrifice is far greater than keeping. And my prayer is that they see that, and they understand that, and they see the joy and the beauty of what that looks like. So there is less of a cost for me, I think. There's a greater cost for the church. There's a greater cost for people who may be leading particular ministries and specific. So it's trying to, how do we... And I think if church planting is something that just suddenly becomes something, without a biblical understanding of why we do that, to show that I believe that it's God's primary strategy for us to reach the world. That's my conviction. I think the church is the means by which he displays his wisdom to the world. The church is the means by which his glory is displayed to the world. We need more churches and communities. We just need more churches. And so I'm convinced of that. So I think if you communicate that and you teach that and you see that, and not only see that, you show people that that's clearly in the Bible. It doesn't say church planting. It doesn't say church planting. It doesn't say thou shalt plant a church. But the overflow of what it is to be God's people is that we display his glory to the world. That's what happened in the garden. It gets distorted in the fall. And God then brings a people to himself to display his glory to, and his glory through Israel. And then they mess it up. And then, long story short, you all know it, we get to Christ. Christ comes, redeems, we're all in him. And Lord Jesus, what does he? He gathers a people to himself. And the glory is going to be displayed through them. They go, they tell, churches are flown from that. And see the Apostle Paul, you just see that's the strategy by which. And I think if you do that, people are able to walk through the cost and the challenge of that, of going, this makes sense. What it also does, it actually gets people excited, not only to be sent, but also to be senders. Which I think
will be my next question.
Yeah, okay.
So,
sorry.
Think about the cost of sending. One of the things we've found about doing church plants is it makes you're asking everybody in the congregation to really think through, should they be here or should they be there? And that's a super helpful discipleship tool. Like, are you doing what the Lord wants you to do with your life is what we want to be asking people all the time. You've talked about the joy of sending there. Tell us some of the ways that, even though there's been a cost, planting has spiritually benefited Cornerstone, like the OG Cornerstone.
Yeah, the OG Cornerstone. Yeah. One way is because the reality is this, my conviction also is that we want to teach everything and show the gospel reasons for this. We've never planted a church because we've run out of space. We've never done that. Because that looks reactionary. And it looks like, oh, we're doing this just to make room for us. So it's like, if you guys go, that'd be really helpful for us. That's one, that nobody wants to be sent like that. It's like me saying to my kids, you know what, I could do with a lodge yet because I need a bit more money. So can you move out? Or we could do with a little bit more space. Or your brothers would like to have their own room. So girls, do you mind moving? That's what it could potentially feel like. So there's a sense, my conviction is we want to constantly be teaching and showing the gospel reasons for doing this, which is what I believe the Lord is asking us to do constantly, as much as we're able to do those things. So therefore, where the change in the spiritual growth happens is the fact that people's lives are being captured by the Word of God, and the Word of God through the Word of the Spirit is getting them excited for the gospel, for the church, for lost people, and for them and others in that body to be part of seeing that happen. And also trying to help people see and teach people that actually church planting is not just done by the people who go, it's done by the church. So church plants don't happen because of a guy. Now you need particular people with particular gifts, and that's right. But it's churches that plant churches. It's not organisations that plant churches. It's not networks that plant churches. It's churches that plant churches. And when I say that, it's the whole church. So it's the older folks that may not be able to move to a community, but you know what? They're praying every day. It's the folks that are unable, but they have the financial means, the ammunition for the mission to be able to pour that in. That actually there's something that they get excited by. So there's a lot in terms of the actual sending, but also as people are sent out, there's more opportunity for people to step up and serve in different ways. You know, we've sent out, I think 7, possibly more than that, 10, 15 men who could pastor the church better than me. I just know that. Gifted, so gifted. But we've only been able to do that because we've created space for them to step up in this context to then be sent. Worship leaders, people who are moving to put their kids in certain schools in order to engage in certain communities. And what's happened in Cornerstone is those different spaces have been created for other people to step in. The bottom line is, if we think the church is just about what happens on a Sunday, we have limited means by which people can serve. Are you with me? So we have limited means by which people can serve in the sort of conventional sense. But if you're talking about church planting all the time, the reality is this: lots of church plants don't have the legitimate buildings and means for us to serve. What it is if we don't get out and engage with these people, if I'm not around the school gates, if I'm not in the coffee shops, if we're not spending time with our neighbours, well, nobody else is going to do it. No one else is doing it because we're that church there. We want to be in the midst of that. Now, what's really infectious about that, and people are talking about that and they're sharing stories and coming back and saying, this is what we did, it actually stirs up the congregation. In Cornerstone Church, which is Liverpool, which is a larger church than any of the churches, it's easier just to come, sit at the back, receive. But actually you see it stirring up to go, listen, I'm the only Christian that sits in that coffee shop. I know that. It's for me to get to know these people. I'm the only Christian in my street. God's got me there specifically to do that. So actually church planting not only is about putting a body of people to have a service, it actually does something for people to be on mission. And it also creates that opportunity to say, I'm a Christian, come and meet other people who know Jesus. This is the church and it's down the road. And we have a lot of people that live around Cornerstone, and I've just seen, as we've sent more people out, people get stirred up and we've communicated, look folks, we can do this as well. We should be doing this as well.
Yeah, great. Church leader question here. When do you feel ready to plant a church?
Never and always. And that's not a cop-out. Never and always. You're never ready. Like, I got 4 kids. We were never ready to have any of them. We just weren't. But on one level, we were always ready. So what I'm saying is, we should always be ready, because, and I'm coming out of my conviction of what I think the Bible's saying. So if I'm a pastor, I should be ready that this is something that I need to be thinking and praying about. Now that doesn't mean I make it happen. What it means, I'm always ready to ride the wave that God creates. So I think about a surfer. So surfers can only surf. They can only surf when God creates the wave. Now, what we can do as church leaders is use that as a cop-out not to do it and not to do something. We can do that. But what surfers always do, not that I've ever surfed, I've just observed them, is they spend a lot of time getting their board ready, getting their body ready, understanding the waves, understanding the swell, understanding where the riptide is, understanding those things. So when the wave starts, they're ready to go. And I think that's the responsibility. So I think we should always be at a point of trying to be ready. Now I appreciate you can't just get out and surf. You've got to grow, you've got to learn, you've got to get it ready. That's part of the process of walking. But the reality is we're never ready, because we don't determine the times and the seasons, God does. And we've planted churches where, I'll be honest with you, I felt we're not ready and that guy's not ready. And I think we've had we're praying and walking through, looking to plant another church in Old Swan. That's the last time we planted a church was it'd be 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago. And I felt that we've been ready to plant a church for the last 3.5 years at any point. But God's just not moved. We've even said we're going to go and plant a church, and we've not been able to gather a team. And we've planted lots of churches. There was just, I thought we were ready, but we weren't. But there's been certain things. So, and that's not a cop out. And I say that to encourage, to say, get it on the agenda of what it is, because that's what I believe God calls us to do as his people, is to do that. But also, I think in our churches, we have so many people of godly character with the potential to lead and have so many gifts to serve, that actually our lack of trust and our lack of stepping in actually hinders them from serving, I guess, the way the Lord wants them to serve. Because we don't want in our churches self-proclaimed anything. We don't want that. And what I mean by that is, like, my conviction is there's an inward call of God, and then that is discerned through the church in the context of the authority of the church, and the eldership and the church, and other people speaking in, and the light of that. But if there's no avenue, if there's no route for people to exercise those gifts, we could actually be the blocker for certain ways for people to use their gifts, but also to reach other people in their context and in their community. So I think we should always seek to be ready, but also recognise that we're never ready. Because I guess surfers want to surf, but I guess they want to surf when it's not raining, when it's beautiful and they can enjoy it, and it's warm. But sometimes the best time to surf is when it's pouring down with rain, it's freezing, and there's lots of wind. You know what I mean? Well, I guess you need wind anyway. But what I'm saying is, you know what I'm saying? Conditions are never perfect in a fallen world. Never perfect. But so we should always be ready. I don't know if that answers your question. But.
Really helpful. Should we do some questions? Or should we just wave their hands? And I'll repeat them. So if you want to ask something. Are you moving, Peter? Yeah?
Thank you.
Hi, mate.
I have a question based on your what you just said now.
Yeah.
How do you know you are ready?
Yeah.
And how do you come? How do I know I'm ready?
Yeah.
And I'm not being led by the flesh, but by the Spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just repeat.
Yeah.
So the question is, this is really a personal question, how do I know I'm ready and I'm not being led by the flesh, I'm being led by the Spirit? As a church planter. Yeah, of course.
It's a great question. So so in the Bible, what talks about, I believe that everybody has been given gifts. I believe that. I believe everyone's given gifts. And when I'm talking about gifts, I'm talking the array of gifts. Not all of us have been given all the gifts, but God's gifted us in different ways. And one of the gifts is that God has created you to be you, uniquely you. You are indispensable. The world is a better place. The church is a better place because of you. If you weren't here, we'd be worse off. I believe that to be true. I see that. God, He's not done a cookie cutter of people. We know that. We see the diversity of that. And then also then, I believe the God that then gives gifts and he's prepared work for you to do, Ephesians 2, according to his grace, for the good of the church and for the proclamation of the gospel. So these are all things I believe to be right. However, I also believe, as I read through the scriptures, is that the means by which we discern those gifts specifically, is in the context of community. And I'm not saying it's because it's for a pastor or a bishop or a vicar to go, you have this gift and this is what it looks like. What I'm saying is, in the context of community together, that actually we explore that. I'm praying about this, I'm thinking about this, I've got a desire for this, I think this may be the way the Lord is leading me. this is what I feel he may be sharing with me. Could you help me discern that? And discern that with people that you know, people that you trust, people that engage with that, and seek that external affirmation and confirmation in the context. Because if it's the church that plants churches, you want the church to affirm you. You want the church to affirm you. You don't want to be rogue, because I don't think that's good or right. You want the church to confirm you. So I would say, part of knowing is the process of discerning, and that is done with the Lord. It's also done with those people that you trust and are going to be honest with you as well. And then, in light of that, you're not a church planter till you've planted a church. Okay. So there's a sense of, so you're not a dad till you've had a kid. You know what I mean? So therefore, you're not a church planter. So the process then is, what does it look like for me to prepare? What are the things that I need to be thinking through? Who are the people I need to be spending time with? Who are the people that can help me specifically in terms of training? Two things. There's content and there's context. And I think you see that with the Lord Jesus. You see that with Paul and Timothy. So content, you want to get the right content of what that looks like. All this training, whatever the training is, whatever that sort of stuff, you want content, good content that's going to help you in different ways. Then you want to put yourself in the right context to learn and grow. You want to be around people who are maybe thinking about this, praying about this, have more experience, and that helps discern. I worked for an organisation called Acts 29, and we used to assess church planters in partnership with their church leaders. And we used to work with the churches and with those planters to be able to help them. And they'd have strategies and ideas, and we'd encourage guys and give them coaching and developing those different ways. And that's people putting themselves under the submission of the authority of their church, but also the submission to another level of experienced people that have walked before. I just think that when it comes to church planting, I'm not saying we do this for every gift in every area, but in terms of church planting, I think that's the wisest way to do it. And what you want is, you want your church and your church leaders to be laying their hands on you, going, yes, and sending you with great joy and great blessing and partnership and all those things. And they're doing it with tears in their eyes because they actually don't want you to go, but they're doing it. And I don't think you walking and going is the right way. I think there's a time and a place and a pace to what that means.
Great.
Sorry, it's a long question.
Yeah. Yes. Oh yes, the resource that I haven't here written was actually based roughly on the Acts 29 church assessment tool called 10 Questions to Discuss or something with church planters. That takes you through key areas you need to think about with your church. So feel free to take one of those. Right. David?
Does a church need to be of a particular size already? Does it need to have a particular degree of dynamic growth already there?
That's a great.
Yeah. So does a church need to be a particular size or a particular dynamic of growth?
It's a great question. I would say it doesn't need to be a particular size, but I think it needs to be a particular health. So size. Now, obviously, within that, there's parameters. So what I mean is, if you've got 5 people in your church and you want to send 4 to plant a church, you won't have a church. You know, so therefore, you're just moving the people. And size can be an indicator of health. Can be. Size can also be an indicator of unhealth. You know what I mean? The doctors never told me to put weight on, let's put it that way. So it also can be a sign of unhealth. And I think sometimes in our misunderstanding, we can ski with that. So my answer is that it's not size necessarily, but it's definitely health. The first church we planted, I think we had about 40 people in the church, and we planted with 4. There was about 40 people, regular 40 to 50 people, and we planted. We sent 5 people. They met in a front room on the Wirral, and then they met in a pub, and then they ended up getting a building, and it's Cornerstone Church Wirral now. So there's we were in the right place to do that at that time. There are churches with hundreds of people, and I don't think they're healthy enough to plant a church, because it'll probably end up being a split, and it'll probably be ending up you guys go and there's no thought of what it looks like to support that church planter, to support that church, to think that through. Because it's not just about just sending people, it's about how do we support them, encourage them, coach them, engage with them, walk hand in hand with them for a period of time. And wherever your convictions land in terms of what the ecclesial and plurality, polity, whatever, where they land, wherever they land, whether it's like we're going to send this and they're going to be an independent church from day one, whether we're a network, whether you're part of the Anglican Church and there's a parish system, the bottom line is, if you send, I believe you have a responsibility to walk with those people and to love those people and to so that only comes with health. It only comes with health. If you're not healthy, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So
10 people can do that, but
Yes.
200 people cannot do it.
Cannot do it. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, this one, clean.
It's interesting what factors are involved in determining where you church plant. And you mentioned earlier on
That's a great.
about what if you're planting into an area where there's already established churches? What do you do to make sure you're not seen as competition or threat, as some churches might do, rather than, isn't this wonderful some news in the area for the kingdom?
That's right. I got a few thoughts on this. I think the reality is this: we first and foremost, I think part of our roles as leaders, as you are able and as is appropriate, we want to be in good relationships with those who are also doing this sort of stuff. And I think you can have good relationships with people, even if we're in slightly theological streams. That might mean we might not do particular things together, but what it will mean is that we love Jesus and we're for. Look, I'm sure if we went around this room, there are certain things that we're not going to land on in an agreement. We probably may not even plant a church together, but I tell you what, we're all going to be in heaven. Do you understand what I'm saying? So therefore, the relational dynamic of being brothers and sisters is something that's really important. And I think if that is something that if we're leading with that helps. That doesn't necessarily mean because we're great friends with that person in that particular community that we shouldn't think about planting a church. The reason why I think that is because there are different types of churches that I think can reach different kinds of people. I remember there was a brother came to see me and he was part of the IPC, International Presbyterian Church. I think he was at your church for a while, wasn't he? And he came to see me and he said, what are your thoughts? Because he was thinking of a particular area. I don't think he ever did it, but he didn't, a particular area. And my thought initially was, I didn't know the guy, I didn't know his situation. I said, Liverpool could do with a really good Presbyterian church. And I'm not Presbyterian. I'm independent, right? Independent. I'm not Presbyterian. And he was like, I was like, look, if you're godly, if you love Jesus, I think this will be helpful, right? That's what I said. Whether I should or shouldn't. But my conviction is this, because in Liverpool, we have a lot of church schools. And to get into those schools, you have to go to a church. So if we've got Anglican churches that are gospel-centered, that are preaching the gospel, that are keeping to what the Bible says, not to what the Church of England says, what the Bible says. We've got Anglican churches, we've got Presbyterian churches, we've got charismatic churches who are godly people that love the Lord Jesus Christ, right? We want to see. So let me go back to the Presbyterian. Old church building, people are going to go, I'll go to that, and I'll go there for a year to get my kids in the school, right? I'm not opposed to people doing that, because they're going to walk in, and if the gospel's being preached, they're going to get saved. We've had plenty of people that have come to Cornerstone. They've been around for a year. We've never seen them since. And I honestly say they've been here every week over the last year. I've had to. I'm more than happy to do that, hoping that they would stay, and they haven't. We've had plenty that have come to get their kids in the local schools, and they've got more than they've bargained for. And I think so I think that's what I'm saying to say that. I think we've got to have those particular conversations in those particular areas. I think that's an important thing. But I also think we want to be driven by, as much as we're able and can, where aren't there churches, if we can. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't. But also practically, there are particular areas where the folk that are in your church may find it hard to go and plant churches. They just might do. And you might have a particular passion to see that happen, but if you're not able to raise up people in your particular church to see that happen, why beat people up over it? Because there are lots and lots of streets, and this is my final point on this. I think we're not doing as well as we think we are.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
1 in 5,000.
1 in 5,000. We've got one church for every 5,000 people. Right. And I'm telling you, not one of those churches has 5,000 people in it. You know what I mean? And we're not doing as well as we are. We think we are. And I think sometimes we can get caught up in the, wow, look at this. When we were at Ramleys Road, we had 3 services. Right? 3 services. Wow. And I could lead with that. Oh yeah, I was leading the church. Oh yeah, we have 3 services on Sunday. The building only held 50 people. And don't get me wrong, it seems great, but it's only 150 people. And I'm not saying about 1,000 is great. What I'm saying is there's more people that live on the street than there were attending our church. And what I'm saying, we're not doing as well as we are. So we could put a church, like Liverpool's like a city made up of villages. It's like, isn't it? It's like, so you live in Penny Lane, you don't need a car. Schools, pubs, whatever, it's all there. See the way I went to school and pub straight away? Right.
Sorted.
My heart, my passions, I'd love, before I die, is to plant a church in every single one of those villages in the city. I'd love to see that happen. More importantly, I'd love to see a gospel preaching church in the heart of every single one of those villages in this region, in Merseyside. It's our responsibility. It's no one else's. It's our responsibility. So, and then we wouldn't even be touching the sides. We could put a church at the end of every street, and we still wouldn't touch the sides. So I'm like, we've got to stop being competitive. We've got to stop thinking, where are we? But what we need to do is relationally engage. So just say, we want to plant a church in the city centre. Just say. I'm not doing that without conversations with Maurice. Not in a month of Sundays. In fact, Maurice, let's have that conversation. Is this, and we work that out together. And it might be that we do, and it's a team of people from both churches. Do you understand what I'm saying? And I think we've got to, there's no formula to it, but we've got to be open to it.
Just to say, we've had a lot of discussions about this in our church leadership about, do you plant a church, as in you identify an area and think we should do something there? Or do you do it like we have people from the church there, so we should do it there? Either's fine. I think if you do the latter one, led by where people are, you end up with a lot of churches in places where Christians like to live.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I don't think anywhere has too many churches, so I don't have a big problem with that. But you just need to be aware of that. Whereas even on Nick's map that he showed us at the start, it's not there anymore. But there is this rim, it's roughly the borough of Knowsley, that even on the TFH map, you can see it around the head there, is very empty. And so some people have got to say, even though that's not where we are, we think something ought to happen here. I think both ends, not either or. Sometimes be led with where your people are, but then now and again you've got to say there's a real need here. Let's pray for God to do something there, and who's going to come with us. So both ends. We should stop really. Do you want to tell us what's going to happen next?
There was one more. Yeah.
Oh, who was it? Can we do one more? Is that right? Mark.
Just following on from that, if you felt to go to a particular area and you know, even not maybe more than one church, would not want you to be there because they do not want your kind of whatever they may be misconceptions about it. But what would you do if you know you felt God something to go there?
It's a great question. It's a great question. I think I'd be less worried about going there. I'd be more concerned about, if that was the attitude, I think I'd probably want to plant a church there.
That's just your personality. Chance of an argument. I'm there.
But I mean, there's just not a generous spirit there, is it? And I'm assuming annoyance, I'm assuming anger, I'm assuming sinful responses. But if it's fear, if it's all those things, I'd probably slow down and have more conversations over time. I think sometimes I've been guilty of this, we do things too quickly, and I think that's communication.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, sir.